When we remember that decimals are a special kind of fraction, the way that we add and subtract decimals becomes easy to remember. Remember, when we add and subtract fractions, we need to have a common denominator. Because they are just a special kind of fraction, the same applies to decimals. But these special denominators that decimals have make them very easy to work with. Rather than go into detail on the theory, let me show you an example. Let's say we want to subtract 4.1 minus 0.13. First, I'm going to do this with the curtain pulled back, just in terms of the fractions, and then once we see what happens with the fractions, let's see if we can develop this into a rule for decimals left in decimal notation. So 4.1, the numerator is 41, right? Just these digits without a decimal point. I see one digit after the decimal point, so I want 1 0 in the denominator. In 0.13, the numerator is 13, and I see 2 digits after the decimal point, and so I want 2 zeros in the denominator. Okay, I see, of course, that these are different denominators. But it's easy to see what I could multiply 10 by in order to get 100. So we can say 41 tenths is, what do we have to multiply 10 by to get 100? Just 10. So 41 times 10 in the numerator, that's 410. 13 hundredths already has the denominator I want, so I'm going to leave that be. So my problem is going to be 410 hundredths minus 13 hundredths. Okay, these have the same denominator. So my new denominator is going to be 100. My new numerator is going to be 410 minus 13. Let's write that subtraction out by hand because I'm going to want to look at it in a minute. Once you have it written out and all lined up, you can use a calculator if you want, but this is pretty straightforward. Right, we have to borrow 10 minus 3 is 7. 10 minus 1 is 9. And 3 minus 0 is just 3. So let's see, we're going to get 397 hundredths. 2 zeros in the denominator means 2 digits after the decimal point. Well, take a look at what happens when I fill in the decimal points in these 3 numbers. What happens? All the decimal points end up in the same place. And all I had to do was, in my 4.1, I had to fill in enough zeros to get the decimal points lined up. So when we go to add or subtract decimals, we see what we need to do. And the thing that we need to do comes from the fact that these are fractions. What is it we need to do? We had to line up the decimal points and add enough zeros that all the columns on the right were full, and then the decimal point in our answer lines up with the decimal points in the numbers we started with. Right, so this first step is like getting a common denominator, and then the second step is just like the denominator in the answer is the same as the denominators we started with. Let's see one more example without going to the fractions. Let's say we want to add 28.5 plus 103.27. So your habit might be to write the bigger number on top. That's fine. I'm just going to write them in the order I see them. So I'm going to write 28.5 and then line up the other decimal point. After the decimal point I have 27. Before I have 103. And then I need to fill in a 0 in this column, just so that I have something in every column. Now I add 0 plus 7 is 7, 5 plus 2 is 7, 8 plus 3 is 11, 3, 1, decimal point, and my answer goes right underneath.